Hi, Mr. 1235 here again. I'm here with the Kaiser75, as he's known on YouTube. Best friend Matthew Kaiser just blew in from the coast of North Carolina.
All the way from Wilmington.
That's right, and he's here to help me unbox the brand new Beatles and Bono vinyl box set. Finally got it today, released on September 9th, 2014. And I was a little late to the party on this one, admittedly. Everybody's kind of done their unboxings already, but I just never received mine. But yeah, me and Matt here are going to kind of play off, talk about the albums, and discuss a little bit of things. First of all, let's start with the book. Came in here, nice hardback book. Many unseen photographs in here. Here's a bunch of old ladies putting copies of Hard Day's Night into the vinyl sleeves, which is pretty cool. You don't get to see the inside of that a whole lot. Great shots of the band and stuff. Them at the Ed Sullivan Show in 1964. Anyway, really cool book. Discusses recording of the albums and whatnot. You guys are here for the music though. And we're going to start, fresh out of the box, with their first UK album. Please, please, man. Take it out of the wrapping. First thing to note, 13 hours studio time, and it was done. The Beatles started recording this at 10 a.m., mastered it at 11 p.m. that night. Very, very impressive for a first album. Get out of here. Pretty impressive, I know.
Oh, it just feels so good.
Fold back sleeves, just like the original. The black and gold polar foam label, like as it was released back in the day. 180 gram vinyl. The updated copyright information for the album. And some amazing songs, some amazing covers. Of course, this album was primarily just covers, though. I saw her standing there in There's a Place, Lennon McCartney songs. But
What I love about this album is the very first song is what I just imagined being back there when this album was first released and hearing that 1, 2, 3, 4, like that sound back then was just completely new and just so rocking. It was a one-of-a-kind sound, and to hear that right off the bat from this group was just history on that. After that count of 4, history was all said and done.
it's one of the most famous 4-part count-ins ever, I believe, for sure. Also the song Boys, sung by Ringo, that was a cover. You know, they tried to give Ringo a little bit of airtime on there. The single Please Please Me, Love Me Do, automatic first hits for the band. Just an amazing debut record. Even has the original Imnitex cleaning material logo on there. I don't even think this company exists anymore, but it was on the original, and that's how they decided to package it. They tried to give you the most true-to-form way that this album was released back in 1962, which is pretty impressive.
And what's cool about this album and the ones come after it, like Beatles for Sale and
Rubber Soul.
Rubber Soul, is that, you know, McCartney and Lennon had their own stuff, but at the same time they paid tribute to other artists that they were inspired by, and
Yeah.
they did that with their first like 4 to 5 albums before they just did everything on their own.
Of course, yeah, the first 2 albums completely inspired by stuff that they would play live in clubs and just artists that, like he said, inspired them. Anyway, that is Please Please Me. One of the best debut rock and roll albums of all time. Okay. Next out of the box, the Beatles' second UK album, with the Beatles. Personally, in one of my top 5 favorite Beatles albums. Move the cellophane. Get the record out, which should have the original yellow and black Parlophone label, which it does. Heavyweight, gram vinyl. Beautiful pressing. Yeah, just as it was released. I love the songs It Won't Be Long and Hold Me Tight, and their cover of Roll Over Beethoven by Chuck Berry. Just a rocking little record that I want my jockey to play. And personally, I like this album a little bit better than their first album. I feel like the first album was a great introduction, and this one right here is when they decided to get really rocket. You know what I'm saying? And that's why I just think this is one of the best albums they've ever done. Yeah. The fold-back sleeves and all that, just as it was released. Amazing record. One of my favorites. And now we get to the first all written by the Beatles album, Hard Day's Night, the soundtrack to the film, their first Beatles movie. America's version of this album got a little bit screwed over. America's version features the songs from the movie and orchestra cuts, just like a soundtrack that you would hear in a movie, where the UK version is just Beatles songs, which is what people prefer. The main single from this one, Can't Buy Me Love, hear that one every damn day. Once again, yellow and black Parlophone label. Just like all of them, all the way up to the White Album, which is the first album on the Beatles' own Apple label.
I don't know how many people know this, but actually the title, A Hard Day's Night, actually came from Ringo.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that came up with that title. Well, it was, unincidental. Was like purposely like, hey Ringo, give us a name for this song, because I highly doubt they ever did that. but nah, it's what they were just working or something. All these letters and just the whole big long day.
End of the night, and Ringo said, "Oh, it's been a hard day's night."
And then boom, here you go.
John immediately decided we need to write a song about that. Anyway, fantastic album. One of the best, in my personal opinion, especially for the first self-written fully Beatles album. Back in sleeve. Tightly. Next out of the box, the Beatles' fourth album, Beatles for Sale. This is the Beatles' first gatefold cover.
One of my favorites.
As you notice, none of the song titles are on the back. As you would normally see it, that's because back in the 60s, they were not packaged in this crap. Whenever you walked into a record store, you could just open it and read the song titles. So, it wasn't inconvenient back in the day, but it's good they put them in cellophane for this release. The first gatefold cover by them. This is them playing at the Washington Coliseum. This photo down here. Fantastic album. Fantastic covers. Once again, yellow and black Parlophone label.
Gosh, for me this is such a. For me, I prefer like the more fast tempo rockin' music, and like Kansas City, Hey Hey Hey.
Of course, yeah. Mr. Moonlight.
Mr. Moonlight, rock and roll music.
Everyone Wants to Be My Baby, the closer.
Yeah. Such a great album.
Fantastic album. Really great covers on this too. Their cover of Buddy Holly, Words of Love on this album is a really good cover. Yeah, fantastic album. Really pays tribute to their heroes once again, as they did on their first two. And Honey Don't was a really great song, sung by Ringo on this album as well. Good rockabilly style. Just breaking new ground on every album.
Oh, yeah.
And that is it. Beatles for Sale. Next out of the box, the Beatles' second movie, the soundtrack to Help. This is when the Beatles started becoming in color. Once again, the American release of this album was done with just songs from the movie and their orchestral versions, just that you would hear in like the background of the movie. So America got screwed over on their version of Help. But once again, the UK edition just had original songs and covers. The cover, Act Naturally, sang by Ringo on this album, is just fantastic.
Which I think is one of his more underrated songs that he sings. I think it doesn't get, because it's personally one of my favorites, apart from the two that he's written. I think Act Naturally is a pretty good one.
Yeah. It's just hard to believe Ringo only had 2 original songs in the entire career. and they were all from the later days of the Beatles.
They got the song Yesterday on here, and Yesterday is actually the most covered song of all time. More artists covered that song in a song, which pretty much makes the Beatles the most covered band as well in music history, which is pretty cool.
And of course, the debut song is just iconic as well, one of the best singles. And really emotional songs on this one too. Every single song kind of dealing with heartbreak and whatnot. Songs like Another Girl and You're Gonna Lose That Girl. You're Gonna Lose That Girl being one of my favorite Beatles songs of all time. But yeah, fantastic album. Definitely one of my favorites. Now the next album is where we really see the Beatles start to come into their own and start to reinvent the world of music forever, starting with the fantastic album Rubber Soul. This is actually the very first Beatles album that I ever owned. Back when I first got into these guys. Oh my god. The elongated cover on this one. Funny story behind this. The Beatles were shooting the cover art as well, and it was this picture kind of, and they had it leaning up against a chair. And they were looking at it or whatnot, and then for some reason the photo slid down in the chair and it made their faces look a little bit elongated in the light or whatever, and Paul pointed at it and was like, oh my god, can you print it like that? Can you print it like that? And he's like, well sure, I can print it like that. And so we have this really elongated, kind of cartoony album cover, and it fit because the name of the album, Rubber Soul, they look a little rubbery.
You stretch it out. And what's cool, like Uncle said, that I like their music starts to change and you hear it and everything. And it also goes with, you know, the album itself. You can tell the difference with the artwork, the font and the lettering of Rubber Soul, and just like you said about the picture, the photograph, the color, their hair, like you can tell that this is a turning point, not just for the Beatles, but for the industry of music themselves. And you got like songs like Norwegian Wood, where it's just kind of, and Nowhere Man, just you hear that very spacey, like out there.
Yeah, this is the first album where George started playing sitar on the song Norwegian Wood, and the opener, Drive My Car, is just an instant, just immediately gets you going when you hear that song.
And with all along with the sitar, eventually you'll hear throughout the songs coming up, like especially Maxwell Silver Hammer with the clang, and they really get kind of worldly with their music.
Oh,
very experimental. That's for sure.
This is definitely the beginning point to where they really started reinventing the wheel with this album. Not to say the previous 5 were not amazing themselves. Next out of the box, Revolver. Oh, they started experimenting on this one. And actually, this is the first album where George Harrison actually opened up the album with the song Taxman. Beautiful copyright information. Beautiful album cover on that one too. I think that was designed by one of the Beatles' friends, the artwork for this one. Yellow and black Parlophone label once again. The song I'm Only Sleeping actually has the first instance of backwards guitar that had ever been recorded. George Harrison purposely tried to record his solo very carefully because he knew it was going to be spliced backwards, which is pretty interesting.
And also, this is pretty much where Harrison started putting his songs, and not only Taxman, but I Want to Tell You as well. So Harrison's starting to come out of the woodwork here a little bit.
Yeah. And the song Tomorrow Never Knows by John as well. Really the psychedelic, just way out there track. Yeah, they finally got their heels into experimenting on this one, and it really paid off. Some people consider this to be their best album, from what I've heard. The album next, though, is considered to be the best album of all time, up against the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds, which is always going to be debated. But Revolver, a classic in itself. If you don't own this, you don't know rock music. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Good God Almighty, this is considered to be, by most people, the greatest album ever recorded to tape ever. Many people would argue it was by the Beach Boys, but I personally consider this to be the greatest album ever recorded.
Even the name of the, I mean, even the name of this album compared to, for me, Pet Sounds, I'm just like, what?
Yeah. Once again, yellow and black Parlophone label. And what's special about this album as well is that this is the first time that people started incorporating prizes into the release of music. You know, you have these special editions that come out all today that include bonus songs, bonus material, maybe even posters. This album actually was the first to include cutouts for your children. These cutouts are really, really hard to find inside of the album because they were meant to be cut out. So, you know, you find a remastered copy of this and you'll get holes and stuff in there. You have the patches here that can be cut out to sew onto your jacket or whatever. You've got a mustache that you can cut out and stick out, and this right here is a stand. You cut along the white here and around their heads or whatever. You can fold the white part back and set it up on your desk or whatever, and these are little badges. Just really cool how they did that on there.
What's also cool about this album is that, yes, we know that the Beatles, but they're one of the first bands to go under a different alias as a band.
Yeah, you have bands like Foxborough Hot Tubs, like Green Day, who kind of did that, and this is their alias. Also, the album was originally released in this red and white wash inner sleeve, but once again, in the good sense of the record company, they packaged it in this one so that you can keep the original sleeve pristine, nice and clean, so you don't damage it sliding your record in and out. So yeah, Beatles once again changing the game, and this being one of the most talked about and celebrated albums of all time. Songs like When I'm 64, Within You Without You by George Harrison.
If I'm not mistaken, is this one of the first, I guess, albums to feature the lyrics to the songs?
That is correct. This is actually the first rock album that featured the lyrics to every single song on the back of the sleeve. No other album had done that before. Just a fantastic album. I mean, Sgt. Pepper fading into With a Little Help from My Friends, which is great. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, a classic. Fixing a Hole.
Yeah, there's Benefit from Mr. Kite.
One of the craziest, most out there songs ever, probably for the time.
And especially if you've seen Across the Universe, that scene alone, oh man.
It's wild. Totally wild. And when the Sgt. Peppers, they retained their coats and their regalia for Sgt. Pepper's from the next album and the next movie released by the Beatles, Magical Mystery Tour. This album is fantastic, and in the UK, this album is only released as an EP. And in America doesn't do that shit. America does not do EPs. So they released it as an album by saying, hey, you know, they got some songs they haven't put on albums yet, so maybe we should just stick it on there so that we can call it an album. And so they stuck songs like Hello Goodbye, Strawberry Fields Forever, Penny Lane, Baby You're a Rich Man, and All You Need Is Love to complete the original movie songs that were just released as an EP across the top there. So special about this album is the comic book that was imprinted on the inner sleeve back in the 60s that explains the movie pictures and stills from the Magical Mystery Tour TV special. It was seriously released like this back in the day, which is probably another first, and this comic kind of explains the movie from front to back. Great colors on this one. How it's been reproduced like this. It's really fantastic. Great shot there at the end. And because of the fact that this is the full album, I know that the label is going to be a Capitol label, because Capitol was how the Beatles released their albums in America. It's going to be a rainbow label from Capitol Records, and as we see in here, Capitol Records, rainbow swirl. This is how you know it's an American copy, because it's an album and not an EP. So That's a little bit different from the yellow and black polyphones that we've seen this entire video. Fantastic record. Magical Mystery Tour, Full on the Hill, Flying, Blue Jay Way. Just a fantastic album and really shows off the magic as it was intended. And now we move on to the second from the last album in the box, if you want to go ahead and pick that out of here. The Fantastic and Beautiful White Album, or what's known as just the Beatles, if you want to go with self-titled. What's cool about this album is that back in the 60s it was released with a serial number on the front of the album cover, and every single number was different. This was created this way so that every single person who bought a copy of the White Album had a unique White Album. It was their number.
That way it just wouldn't be white.
The Beatles are embossed on the front cover, and you can't really see it.
And I've always found it interesting, I'm sure a lot of you have noticed, is that the name The Beatles on this album isn't like straight, it's a little crooked.
That's
I always
right.
found that very interesting.
Yeah. It's pretty entertaining. Do you know who owns copy number 1 of this album? Ringo. Ringo owns serial number 0000001. My number is 90,039.43. This is, no other album has this number on it, which is pretty cool how they introduced that.
That's very cool.
This album is also another gatefold with the tracks on the inside.
But what's cool about this is like, only like, mostly like dedicated, committed Beatles fans know these songs in this album. Because if people know the Beatles, they're not going to know like Your Blues or
Piggies.
or Honey Pie or Rocky Raccoon or there it is, the continuous story of Bungalow Bill.
Oh yeah, that's a great one there.
But one of my favorites probably is Oobla-dee Blah-Da.
Obla-dee Obla-da is definitely a highlight.
Oobla-dee, oobla-da.
This album is also a top loader, which is the first one of their collection. You didn't pull them from the side, you pulled them from the top. Tied in there. And this is the first album that was released on the Beatles' own Apple label, hence the apple on the label. Another cool thing is that this album also included a poster. And there it is. A big ass poster. We have a collage on the inside, on the outside, and the lyrics to every single song on the other side. Another cool thing about this record, they kind of reinvented, is the inclusion of 4 8x10 photographs. Take a little feel inside. There they are. Of John, Paul, George, and Ringo. And they have a nice little clip on the back that says artwork copyrighted Apple Corps. They do that so that if somebody tries to pass these off as original 1960 copies, you will not get ripped off. This right there proves that it's from this box set and it's not an original. But yeah, pretty awesome. The Beatles' only double album. Fantastic record. Fantastic prizes included in the record. Photographs and a giant poster. And then the last one of the bunch is the Beatles' Mono Masters. This is kind of this box's version of Past Masters. And it is a triple album. 3 records inside this thing. Now, the only thing different about the Mono Masters here than the original Past Masters that everybody probably owns is the inclusion of the Yellow Submarine soundtrack songs on side 5 of this album. Only a northern song altogether now, Hey Bulldog, and It's All Too Much. The reason for that is the mono mix of the Yellow Submarine soundtrack was just a fold down of 2 stereo tracks. They created a fake mono, so it didn't warrant being included in this box set. But they were nice enough to include it on the mono masters. But of course, everything else that you find on the normal past masters is included in this set. And the wonderful tri-gatefold, which is very, very cool, with some pictures and stories from recordings once again, with 3 discs on the inside, all with an Apple label, it looks like. Amazing set here. Just a compilation of all of the singles and B-sides and tracks that didn't make the original albums. And that is the Beatles in mono box set. The book is fantastic. The albums are fantastic. The reproduction that they put into these albums to recreate it just how it was released back in the 60s is just astounding. You definitely don't find this level of detail in the stereo box set that they released a few years ago. The stereo box set included a copy of the White Album that didn't have a serial number in it, back in the day, and this one, they were kind enough to recreate these albums as they were intended, and I think that's very impressive. So thank you for watching, and keep listening to the Beatles. I hope you purchase your own copy of the box set.
Rock on.